Welcome to another episode of our video series of the critique of modern systems. Hello there. I hope you're having an insightful week.
I am, thank you.
I've been really wrestling with some of our material on community structures this week. It's such a fascinating tangle of, the ancient and the digital.
It is, isn't it? And that tangle, that's precisely where we're headed today.
Good.
We're looking at the very foundation of human relationships, specifically how the rules of what we call networking of social capital have been just completely rewritten in this hyper-globalized digital world.
It feels like such an urgent topic because everyone is trying to navigate this shift, whether you're running a business
Or just trying to feel connected. Exactly.
Yeah.
What we're seeing really is this ancient human need for cooperation, for solidarity, for, forming our clans. And it's all being played out on a stage that has, well, infinite capacity, but often delivers zero depth. It creates these incredible opportunities, but also just immense friction.
And that's the tension we need to resolve for you, the listener. We're going to analyze how those traditional, reliable community bonds, the local support systems, have been transformed. Our mission is to show you how to navigate all this without getting digital burnout or feeling like you're constantly forcing things.
Right. And to do that, we have to start with the very beginning, the reason we connect in the first place. If we strip away all the modern jargon, networking isn't some corporate trend that was invented, last week.
Right.
It's a fundamental mechanism for human survival. I mean, go back thousands of years. Hunter-gatherers survived because they worked in teams. They had to.
And those teams, those groups, had to be small and built on intense trust, I imagine.
They absolutely had to be. Anthropologists suggest that, the maximum functional size of a clan was really constrained by our brain's capacity. We're basically wired for genuine reciprocal relationships with maybe 100, 150 people.
That's the Dunbar's number idea, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the implication, yes. It's the practical limit for maintaining real trust and reciprocity. That was the whole ecosystem, the old idea of mutual support. Your neighbor needing a coal from your fire. That was essential for life.
And for centuries, that trust was built entirely on, being physically near each other.
Proximity.
Yeah, proximity. We saw that change a bit in the modern age, like after the 1950s when people moved from rural areas to big cities. They didn't just move, they tried to recreate their support systems.
They did. They formed associations based on their hometown. The currency of support was based on who you knew personally, the insider connection.
And this leads us to the big concept we need to define.
Social capital. This is where social scientists started to treat relationships not just as an emotional need, but as a quantifiable resource.
Like money.
Exactly. Just like financial capital money, assets, and cultural capital. Your education, your taste, social capital is the value that's inherent in your social relationships.
But the moment we move from the neighborhood to the global screen, that definition of capital just changes profoundly, doesn't it?
It's a whole new ballgame. It shifts from this quiet, localized trust, the neighbor who just knows you, to something highly visible and explicitly valued.
What do you mean by that?
Well, modern social capital is often measured by who I'm seen with, who I take a selfie with, whose platform validates me. The network stops being this invisible web of trust and it starts becoming a performance, a resource you have to constantly curate and display.
And that visibility changes everything.
It changes the entire game. So this visible, massive scale, that's where we hit that biological bottleneck we just talked about. Our brains are wired for 150 people.
And now we're facing, billions? The scale is it's almost impossible to get your head around. A platform might have 1.5 billion potential contact points.
And that mismatch, it forces us into these high-volume short-term encounters. You just can't maintain depth with that many people.
So it leads to short attention spans.
Exactly. And to the digital burnout we all feel, we're trying to process global information with a kind of small-town operating system. It just doesn't compute.
But the tough reality is you can't really check out, can you? I mean, for your career, for information, for just staying visible, being outside the network means you're opting out of the whole ecosystem.
That is absolutely true. But here's the paradox. Relying only on those digital platforms for success, that's also insufficient.
You still need the real world.
You absolutely need it. The sources are very clear on this. Real-world relationships, physical presence, tangible trust, those are the anchors. They're what give your digital presence any real meaning. Without that, it's just a hollow footprint.
This friction between the scale you need and the authenticity you crave.
Yeah.
It brings us to what you call the transactional trap.
Yes. The old rule was win people over, build bridges.
And now,
Now there's this pervasive anxiety that networking has become purely extractive. I met this person, they might be useful, so I'll just keep them in my pocket until I need them.
it's treating people like contacts to be accumulated.
It's the difference between a mutual investment and a commodity.
Mm.
And what's interesting is that we're seeing a backlash. That aggressively transactional approach, the relentless self-promoter, it's often found to be repulsive now. Our collective meter for inauthenticity is tuned really high.
Okay, but how do you balance that with the business world, which at the end of the day is transactional? You have to close the deal, you have to make the ask.
That is the critical question, and it connects directly back to the crisis of attention. When you're overwhelmed by volume, you start treating people like data points.
Like numbers on a screen.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we see this reflected in studies like the WHO reference, noting that excessive screen time, say 4 hours a day or more, is a marker for potential dependency. That level of exposure just drains the emotional energy you need to invest in real, trust-based relationships.
So you lose the bandwidth to be present for the 150 people who actually matter.
You lose the bandwidth. You undermine your entire network capacity.
So if being purely transactional fails and the digital world is just exhausting, what's the path forward? Is that old, sincere, relationship first idea dead? Or has it just taken on a new form?
I mean, it's absolutely taken on a new form.
Yeah.
The core wisdom survives. What's emerged, particularly in really successful collaborative groups, is this concept of generosity capital.
Generosity capital.
The new old rule is simple. Be the person who gives first.
That seems almost counterintuitive in a world where everyone's scrambling for attention.
But it changes the motivation completely. When you lead with generosity, offering help, knowledge, a connection, with no immediate expectation of return, you build positive equity.
Ah, okay.
People see you as someone who contributes value, so asking for assistance later becomes so much easier because you've already established yourself as a collaborator, not an extractor.
So the goal is to enter every interaction thinking, what can I offer here? Even if it's small, before you ever think about what you can get.
Precisely. A network built on selfish gain gives you slippery, short-term results. One built on mutual contribution that creates lasting bridges of trust that can withstand all the digital noise.
Okay, let's translate this into a practical framework for anyone listening. We've sort of synthesized the material into 4, let's call them rules, for building a sustainable network today.
Rule 1, be present, but measure. You have to exist digitally, that's a given, but your presence must be controlled. It must be intentional.
So be the user of the network, not the resource for the platform.
You've got it. If you're constantly drained, you can't invest high-quality energy in real connections.
Okay, rule 2.
Anchor in the physical. Digital relationships can be fragile. You have to continuously prioritize the real world, your family, your long-term friends, your actual community.
Right. Those relationships took years to build. You can't compare that to a like or a follow.
Not at all. They are your unshakable foundation of trust.
What's rule 3?
This one is profound for the current age. Prioritize micro-influence over macro fame.
So forget millions of followers.
Forget them. Focus your energy on meaningful engagement with a small, dedicated group. Aim for, say, 100 people who genuinely care about your work and what you produce. Those 100 people are resilient. They provide higher trust, better engagement. True impact today is micro-focused and high quality, not macro and shallow.
I love that. And the final rule.
Rule 4.
Seek diversity and contribution. You must join different groups. Professional, a hobby, a community project where you can genuinely contribute something tangible.
Your knowledge, your effort.
Your voice, your perspective. If you can offer value, the group becomes yours. It also prevents you from falling into an insulated echo chamber.
It forces you to grow.
The key to all 4 rules is that shift in mindset. When you stop thinking about extracting and start thinking about adding, that's when your network just organically thrives. Hashtag outro.
What a clear path forward. So
Right.
the tools have changed. We're using screens instead of, front porches.
Right.
But that fundamental human need for community and mutual aid, it's still there. The key is moving from a transactional mindset to a contribution-based one. And that entire transition, it relies on one necessary condition. If you're sitting there wondering, okay, where do I start building this healthy network? There is one foundational key. And this is the final thought we want to leave you with.
Okay.
The initial key to starting any new, healthy, network, digital, or physical, is the act of producing something.
Producing something, even if it's small.
Yes. Whether you're producing a book or mastering a professional skill or building a piece of software or maybe just improving how you make bread, that act of creation provides the tangible value you need to contribute.
It gives you something to offer.
It gives you something of value to offer. It ensures your network is built on shared purpose, not just resource extraction. It enables generosity capital from the very start.
A really profound thought to end on. Produce value, and the network will follow. Thank you for guiding us through this today. It was essential.
My pleasure, as always, and thank you for listening.